Good morning and welcome to my kitchen floor where we are going to be working on a painting today. And I'm working in my handmade sketchbook and I'm working with a variety of different supplies. We're going to create a little fishy today. This is not the best fish I've ever drawn, but I did have fun drawing it and hopefully you guys enjoy this chill, relaxing video with me. So I'm starting with some Posca pens and I'm just making a lot of shapes on the paper. I'm not really stressing too much about what the shapes are, where they're placed, or even the colors that I'm using. I just picked a few colors that I liked and started going with it. I like to smudge out my Poscas a lot. I'll put them down and then while they're still wet, I'll use my finger to smudge them out. It gives a really nice, almost painterly look, and it's a really interesting and different way to use Posca markers so that you get different textures to contrast. When working with abstract art, one of the biggest things that I've learned is contrast, very much important in abstract art. You want to have contrast in everything you do, whether it's colors, whether it's lines versus shapes versus soft edges versus hard edges. You want to think about it in all different kinds of ways so that you're incorporating enough contrast in your piece for certain things to stand out and certain things to go in the background. That said, I think the most important aspect of abstract art is to play. Playing is so fun, so just let yourself be free and expressive. I love creating these abstract backgrounds to then paint like fish or birds or other small creatures on top. I've been really getting into it. In this painting, I didn't use a reference, which I honestly really regret. I've been trying to use reference way more in my art. I rely on it, not using it way often because I'm lazy. Like, I'm just like, oh, it seems too much effort to look up the reference or to like work from it or to try to be realistic or whatever. But references are really, really helpful for a lot of reasons. When we're thinking of something like a fish or a face, we have this idea in our head of what it looks like, but that's not really what it looks like. It's kind of like when you draw an eye. A lot of people will draw like a symbol of an eye instead of what an eye actually looks like. And that's kind of what happened with this fish. And that's why it's important to use reference so that you're not just drawing what you think you know, but versus what's actually there in real life, especially when it comes to things like animals where every single animal looks so different from each other. I think it's really important for me to be using references when it comes to that. So that's something that I really learned from this piece. Looking back at it, I'm just not as happy with it as I could have been. And if I had used a reference, I think I would have been a lot happier with it. So it's worth it to take that extra time at the beginning and really give yourself like a solid foundation to work from. Now I'm going in with my beloved Lyra Aquarelle watercolor crayons. I adore these so much. I'm also using these alongside the Stabilo, these like chunky 3-in-1 pens watercolor crayons that are so amazing. I love both of these. The Stabilo ones are really thick and they will like really lay down pigment on top of pretty much anything. The Aquarelli, the Lyra ones are not quite as like, they won't lay down pigment quite as much on top of certain surfaces, like shiny surfaces, but they blend out so beautifully and I have so many fun colors. I have a really big set of them, so I love using them and using them to add different textures to a piece and to also like build up shading and things like that. So you can kind of see I'm establishing the shape of my fish, the body of my fish, where his tail is going to be, and at the same time I'm incorporating some of that blue into the rest of the piece so that it kind of ties in with the fish in the center. I'm trying to keep everything kind of cohesive here. So then because these are water activated, I'm going to spray them down with some water and tap off a little bit of the excess pigment with a paper towel. And while it's still wet, I'm going to go in with a acrylic marker. This isn't a Posca. I always say Posca markers, but they're not. They're just random acrylic markers of a variety of different brands. This one is actually the Michaels own brand, and which I think is Artist Loft, and they're awesome. Actually love them so much. So definitely recommend going out and buying those. I think it's $20 for a pack of like 6 or 8 or something like that. So really, really good markers, like them a lot. And now we're going in with some paint, mixing in some blue and white for a nice bright pale blue and starting to use that to add a little bit of highlights to the fish and really starting to pull out where the scales are and build up the shape of the fish. So this is where I start diving into paint more, is working on this actual like fishy himself and trying to build him up and get his shape and his form, as well as that like shininess and sparkliness of the scales is so pretty to me because I love glitter and I love sparkly things. And maybe that's why I love fish so much. They just live in their little fishy lives, blooping around, bloop, 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 just being a fish. And I like it. So I'm using these short little brush strokes using a flat shader brush to put in these kind of scale textures as I go. And I build up lots and lots of little layers. I don't worry about my paint laying flat on the paper or anything like that. I once had actually a fellow artist ask me why I left my brush strokes so chunky. Oh, I got paint in my hair. Yep. And it's because I like the chunky brush strokes. I like seeing the paint on the paper and the thickness of it. It's one of those things that really appeals to me about art. And I think that's something that's really important to consider if you're an artist yourself, is why does art appeal to you? What is it about art that makes you want to keep creating? Because for me, I love actual art supplies like paint. The look and feel of paint on paper is so soothing to me. I don't even care necessarily what I'm painting. I'm just happy when there's paint on the paper. And I think that's why abstract art has started calling to me so much, because it really is all about the paint and the composition and the techniques in the media that you're using. There's no like image to rely on. Obviously in this painting we are putting an image in there, but I think it's been a really good exercise for me to break out of relying on visual imagery to communicate my point or to communicate emotions. It allows me to take some time back and focus on just like the colors and the composition and the principles of art that sometimes get forgotten or left behind because of the excitement over drawing a character or a specific subject. Working in on some more little details on the fishy's face here and just building him up so that he looks nice and three-dimensional. And I think he's coming out pretty cute so far. Like I said, he's not the best fishy I've ever painted, but that doesn't mean that I don't love him. Adding in some splatter because I love splatter. I think splatter is just such a fun little addition to paintings. And then going in with a black crayon to give him some little eyes, just kind of smudging that so it's a little softer. And then I felt like he was really blending into the background, so he needed some sort of line work, and I went in and added just some suggestions of lines using that black crayon. Nothing too crazy, just like a little bit of line art here and there to pop him out of the page. And then he needed to be incorporated more with the abstract background. So I'm starting to go back to the abstract background and kind of layer it and bring it forward in front of him so that like parts of the abstract background are behind him, parts of it are slightly obscuring him. That's something that's really important to me, is for these animals to feel like they are part of their environment and not just like an animal on top of an abstract background, but actually interacting with and part of this abstract environment. I also want to talk a little bit about the style of this video. I am kind of going back to the old school. You have your art and you just chat. You chat about the art. You chat about the things that come up when you're talking about the art, like composition, like contrast, or like, being more free in your art, whatever it is that we're going to talk about, just kind of letting it come up naturally. And I hope that you guys enjoy this style. It's the most natural for me to film. I'm not a scripted kind of person. I don't do well with writing out a script for a video. I never get the time or the length right anyway. Like, it's always way shorter than the actual video is. So it's just better for me to just sit down and talk to you guys as if you were my friends and I'm talking about the piece that I'm doing with my friends. Adding in some little dots, smudging them out because I didn't like them, and then pulling them back up and covering them over because you can always fix and change the things that you don't like. And then adding in more little dots with this cool green. And then finally, I felt like the little fishy, he needed to really reflect his environment a little bit more. So I went in and used some of these like yellow and the pink crayons, and I started adding some highlights and reflections to the fishy. So there's all this yellow and pink around him, so I felt like he needed that reflected on him, so I went ahead and did that, just again so that he feels like more a part of his environment, and adding in some final highlights with that blue. And then of course I have to add gold metallic because I love the shiny. It makes me so happy. I also love painting with my fingers. I think it's a really great technique. You get a really cool little like dot when you do it. And honestly, it's just fun. It makes me feel really connected with the paint and what I'm doing to have it just like on my fingers and on my hands. So yeah, that is my fishy for this painting, for this video. I spent the morning painting it, just sat in the sunlight. Sometimes it's really good to get out of your normal environment and try something a little bit different. So this was really therapeutic for me. I hope you guys liked this video and that it was cozy and nice and chill. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.